Good afternoon. My name's Nick Leader. I'm the country manager for France. If you listen to my accent, you might think that's a bit strange. I'm French and Australian. I'm one of the few people, my wife says to me, I'm actually one of the people who has to apologise for his accent in both languages. So, but this afternoon I'll just be speaking in English. So welcome. Welcome to you all. Welcome in particular to our RE100 partners who are here this afternoon. We're delighted to welcome you to Google France. I think over the last week we've showed that Google's determined to play its part in helping on environmental issues. This comes from a deep motivation from our founders about thinking about how we can do better as a company and make sure that we're acting in a responsible way. So I'm sure you know who Google is, but I might just tell you a little bit about what we're doing in the environmental area before I introduce John Woolard, who's the Google Vice President for Energy, who knows much more about this than I do. But I will just give you a couple of the highlights that have been around over the last week. So Google has been 100% carbon neutral since 2007. And today, 37% of the energy we use comes from renewable sources. There's been a lot of effort put into also working out how we can be more efficient with our consumption in our data centers, which account for almost all of our energy consumption. And over the last 5 years, we've lifted the level of performance that we get from a single unit of electricity by a 3.5 factor of 3.5. I've worked in digital media over the last 18 years, and we've seen just enormous changes in the digital media space during that time. At the beginning, when the internet started, we started to look at curves about what might happen if digital followed the path that we thought. Just to give you an indication of that, 10 years ago, YouTube was born. Today, there are over 1 billion people using YouTube, 400 hours of content put onto YouTube every single minute. And I think in that story of how fundamentals can drive a change is both a sign of hope, but also a sign of caution about environmental issues. When the fundamentals are in place and these changes are starting to get driven, we know that they can have enormous impact. We also know that when incentives are correct and when people are motivated to make a change, that we can see massive scale. So 3 billion people are using the internet today across the planet. That number was 400 million 10 years ago. And consumers are going to spend $400 billion on consumer electronics this year alone. So the money's there. If the incentives are right, we can make enormous changes in what we do in the way we deploy technology. So during the conference of the COP21, the COP21, we've been present at Le Bourget in both the blue and the civic areas. If you're in the civic zone, please stop by and see the portal that we have there. But to tell you much more about what we're doing in the area of energy, please welcome John.
Thanks. All right. Thanks, Nick. We've got a great program in store for you, so I'm going to be very short with my comments, but I just want to make a couple of comments on just the energy picture in general. Before I do that, though, where's Mars? Hannah. There. Mars and his team deserve a great. They've set up a great event, done a great job. The whole Google team. I just want to give them a quick round of applause. Thanks. There was a lot of work that went into transforming this room and this event into what it is today. So I think the team's done a lot of hard work. Also, Emily Farnsworth and the team from Renewable Energy 100, thanks for the help in supporting this as well. With that, let me just dive right into a couple of quick comments on what's at stake here, and then we'll get into the two panels. When I think of, I've been focused on energy and climate change for the last 22 years now, and there were very few of us. There were more than you think. I still see people today. I saw people at the venue that I saw 15 years ago thinking about some of these issues. But what's happening now is you've got a much bigger groundswell of business and of people and citizens of various countries now coming together. And this has a much more impactful feel to it than it ever has before, what's happening here. And there are a couple of issues that I think, categories that I think are really key to think about when you think about framing this climate issue. One, a big one is scale. I think to understand the scale of what needs to get accomplished here, think about how big a nuclear power plant is, or a big coal plant. It's about 1 gigawatt. And we have to build between 1 and 3 gigawatts a day of zero carbon power between now and 2040. So the scale is massive. And if you do that with renewables, you have to build about twice as much because of lower capacity factors. So we're going to have a massive build out. The numbers that you hear are fairly daunting, but they're also fairly interesting if you're on the investment side. It'll be somewhere between $20 and $40 trillion that needs to get invested to change over all of this infrastructure. Now, most of this infrastructure needs to get changed over anyway. Coal plants are old. They're going to get phased out. The whole key is how do we systematically and methodically attack this problem and replace them with the right sources of energy. As you look at what those sources are, it leads you right to technology. So we've made some major advances already in technology. Wind and solar have dropped dramatically in price over the last decade. But that's not enough. We still need to put a lot more into technology, and we need to look at other categories as well. So anybody who's been in the energy world for a while knows that there's never a single solution or a single answer. It's generally a broad portfolio. You need diversity, and so we need to keep that entrepreneurial spirit going on investing in new technologies, because we're not there yet. We've still got to drive and push costs down dramatically as we look at how to hit this issue of scale. Now I come to the next category that's really important, which I mentioned already, somewhere between $20 and $40 trillion. Investing and freeing up capital is absolutely critical. So we need new technologies, but then we also need to make sure that companies continue to invest, banks continue to invest. And at Google, we've tried to do our share. We've just announced, as Nick mentioned, another gigawatt of power that we're going to procure. So in a gigawatt, that's a large number for a company like Google. It's a very small number in this big scheme. So we need lots of companies to come follow and to do more and more and more. We're the largest corporate buyer of renewable power in the world, and we need every other company to follow us in this, because the scale that we have to do this at is absolutely staggering. So we need we want to start a process, but then we don't want to be out there alone. And it's encouraging to see lots of companies following behind us, the Renewable Energy 100. You look at Marks and Spencer, you look at a lot of the folks from We Mean Business, and there are a lot of companies that are now coming together to start to move this needle forward. So with that, political leadership is the next element. You can't do this with just business. It's a combination of business and policy and then technology moving forward. And so I'm going to do a very quick introduction of Dominique Ristori. And Dominique has been in this for a long time. He's deputy secretary at the EU for energy, and he's going to give us a little bit of insight into the political process, because this is a very important combination of politics, policy, and business and technology going forward. So Dominique, let me welcome you to the stage. Thanks.
Thank you very much, John, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be there and to see Google with some other key companies in the world shifting into the direction of renewables. And this is important at a time we are in Paris, where the COP21 is addressing one of the major challenges for humanity, and there is now a clear understanding regarding the key role of energy policy. You know that energy, the production of energy and the use of energy are at the origin of more than 60% of emission. 60% of emission. Accordingly, without adapting the energy system, it will be absolutely impossible to finish successfully. And we are convinced that this century, the 21st century, should be the century of renewables. Renewables should play a key role regarding the development of a real low-carbon economy, not only in Europe, but also at global level. And this is only the start of a process. Because we need many things in order to put renewables on the right tracks and trends. First of all, we need clear political support. And we need an adequate regulatory framework. It is why we Europeans, we have decided to organize a fantastic support for that, deciding some key target, 20% of renewables in the primary energy consumption by 2020 and at least 27 for 2030. And we have reached already today 27% of electricity generation through renewables. But at the same time, this is not sufficient. We should go beyond. And we will address the second challenge, which is the challenge of technologies. In that sector, technologies are not yet mature, even if we made already important progress, reducing dramatically the cost, in particular of photovoltaic and land wind energy. More than 80% for photovoltaic, for example. But we are only at the beginning for some new breakthrough in terms of technologies, in particular for offshore wind energy. And we will develop that strongly in the following month. In particular, we will develop that in the North Sea region. But we have already some emblematic success, including with you, with Solar Impulse, the demonstration of how we could use that solar energy, in particular, not only, in the context of air transport. This is fantastic. We have been in situation to see you in Abu Dhabi just before your long tour, but what you have done already is a clear illustration of many things are becoming possible. And finally, the third challenge is that of pushing cities, business, and citizens into the right direction, into the direction of having a clear target, into the direction of renewables, a capacity to produce and to use energy, and also with a capacity to manage that with the less cost possible. Because joining forces into this direction will allow us to finish with also one of the most competitive energy, not only clean energy, but also competitive energy. And my message today is the following. We have been in situation to demonstrate it is possible to manage together economic growth, development of GDP, and reduction of emission. This is a fundamental point, and we are also convinced that renewable energy can and should play an eminent role, a prominent role regarding this target. And this is why we can be today, this afternoon in Paris, more confident to finish well the present negotiation. But at the same time, we should be realistic. This will be a new start, but a start not only at regional level, but at global level. Not all countries are at the same level. We have an obligation to help also the poorest countries, the less developed countries, and I hope we will finish in Paris with not only a good result regarding how to manage that, but also with a clear signal of solidarity. And this will be probably the most important to do in the present context. Thank you very much for your attention.